give a huge round of applause to Paul Thomas.
I have a funny sort of, a dubious sort of celebrity that can best be described to you by an experience that I've had a dozen times over the past several dozen years. I will walk into a nice restaurant with my wife, sometimes with my child, and at a nice table in this nice restaurant will be sitting a nice man with his nice family, and I'll walk in, Paul Thomas. I'll walk in, and he'll see me, and he'll go, I'm very used to being praised and dismissed in the same breath. And so when Reba and Eric called me to come here, I didn't really want to regale you with tales, lurid tales of Ginger Lynn on the top of the Empire State Building, and, you know, I didn't want to do that. But when they described what y'all do here, finding a moment of resonance and a moment of truth in a sexual experience in your life, that appealed to me a great deal. So my challenge here today is to see if I can be truthful with you for the next 20 minutes, which is now probably about 18, and with myself. So with that in mind, please, to set the mood, repeat after me. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want your fucking war. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want your fucking war. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want your fucking war. That's how it was in 1969. Wow. How many of you were even born in 1969? Seriously, how many of... Okay, I might have to make some explanations about some of... about some of the, what I thought were iconic phrases. That was the mood in 1969 at a place called Madison, Wisconsin, which along with Berkeley was the most radical place in the world. We would spend our days in Madison, Wisconsin, marching with signs that said, 1, 2, 3, 4, we don't want your fucking war. And it was Vietnam. And the political statement, the politically correct statement for us to make was not that we will fight in your war, our country right or wrong, is that we won't fight in your war. That was the most patriotic statement we could make. So in this atmosphere, and marching every day, not going to class because it didn't matter, because they were all pass-fail or grade yourself, and that was all part of the revolution, we would march. In this atmosphere, my passion was music. I was a political science major, but music and performance was my passion. I was one of the stars of the My Fair Lady was the play at Wisconsin in 1969. And I sang in a rock band, and I was in the Collegium Musicum, which we sang Bach cantatas all around the Midwest. And I wanted to quit school, and I wanted to try my hand at performing professionally. But in order to quit school, I had to give up my 2S deferment. There was a draft. For those of you who didn't clap earlier when I asked how old you were, there was a draft, and it changed the entire environment. It changed the entire complexion. If I quit school to work, I would likely be drafted. Just because I could hit a high C, they weren't going to let me out of the draft. They didn't let Elvis out. They didn't let Muhammad Ali out. They weren't going to let me out. The Milwaukee Draft Board was reputed to be very lenient in handing out deferments, flat feet, wetting the bed, being a mama's boy. I procured from my family doctor, Dr. Greengard, amazing the things we remember, a letter saying that I had asthma. One of the challenges in talking about your life is to cut through the bullshit, to cut through the legend. We build up legends about ourselves, you know, courses, degrees that we say we have that we don't, lovers that we say we left them when they left us, and on, really cutting through the legend. I don't think I had asthma. I don't really remember. I had enough of a wheeze that I got a letter from the doctor because everyone was sympathetic. My father was in World War II, but he didn't want me in Vietnam. With this letter in hand, I marched down Mifflin Street to the Capitol, and I got on a short bus to the Capitol, to Milwaukee, where the draft board was, and the red brick building, snow-covered spring day, Milwaukee. As soon as I got in that bus, I realized that I was a stranger in a strange land, that I was not with a bunch of other young men, young boys. All of them seemed to have, I remember, golden crew cuts, all of them. They came to the draft board to be accepted in the Army, not to be rejected. To them, this was their best possible option for education, for serving their country. For me, it was unthinkable, absolutely unthinkable. It was my worst possible option. We got to the draft board, and the sergeant, right out of a cartoon with like a Canadian Mountie hat on and big gold buttons, was telling us that they were about to put us through a series of tests, physical, mental, and if we were lucky, if we passed all the tests, that maybe we could get into this man's army. And I began to feel that my letter, the saying that I had asthma, might not be enough. I began to feel how very, very different I was than the boys surrounding me. And I began to worry. If I wasn't careful, I could end up on the front lines of Vietnam. They told us to take our clothes off. Now it gets sexual. They told us to take our clothes off, get down to our underwear for our exam, our physical exam. And I called the officer with the Canadian Mountie hat on and told him, "Sir, I have no underwear on." Which I didn't. I didn't have to say too much. You know, I have no underwear on. Okay, please. Come with me. We can accommodate you. We're going to put you in this separate room here when everyone's done. We're going to give you a physical all by yourself. And again, I started to think, oh boy, I'm in trouble here. You know, these people are not like me. They're on to me. I'd better think of something. So after half an hour, a doctor came in, young doctor. I thought he was a doctor. Maybe he was a janitor. I don't know what he was, but I thought he was a doctor. And he said, "Please take your clothes off. We'll give you a physical now." And this is that moment of truth that I have, since I agreed to do this story here tonight, I've been really trying to think, what happened to me at that moment that allowed me to do what I did? Where did I get the idea? Even where did I get the idea, and how did I execute this idea? I'm going to backtrack a little bit now. My sexuality has always been a big part of my life, particularly my erection. I have a big bold, beautiful erection, and I always assumed I was an X-rated screen star. I did over 400 X-rated movies. I directed over 400 X-rated screen movies that many of you, I hope, have heard of. But, of course, when I was 6 years old, I didn't know that I'd be doing that. And even when I was 6 years old, I was kicked off the school bus, the private school in Chicago, for exhibiting myself to everyone in the bus and everyone all over Chicago, anyone who wanted to see. Even at that time, I felt that this is beautiful. Everyone's going to want to see it. There were incidents that involved me and my erection all throughout my life. Jumping quite a bit ahead, when I was 20 years old, right after this, 1970, not 1969, and the lottery was instituted. I received number 260 in the lottery, which means I didn't need what finally happened at the draft board or my 2S, but I didn't know that at the time. In 1970, I was in a show called Hair. Now, to many of you, I know to some people I'll say I did Hair. They'll say, oh, could you do mine? They've never heard of Hair, so some of you I'm sure have heard of Hair, but some probably have not. It was a big deal. And before the intermission, there was a nude scene. We'd all sing, let the sun shine in, and we'd take off our clothes, and we'd be standing naked. And this was Broadway. This was a big deal. This was not regional theater. This was a big deal. We'd be standing naked in front of the audience, albeit with I remember there's a thin scrim to shock the audience from the bushes. Everywhere, bushes. That's what I remember. Beautiful black dancers with bushes and beautiful white girls with bushes. Oh my, bushes everywhere. Hair. I don't think they meant, when the show Hair, I don't think it was referring to pubic hair, but it could have been. And so we took our clothes off. Let the sun shine in, and we're naked, and the scrim is coming down, and it's intermission. And everybody just quickly put their clothes back on, got dressed. And most of the people were more professional than I was. This was my first professional show, and I was just a hippie with a nice singing voice, and I got in the show. But most of them were professionals, and they put their clothes back on, and they walked back to their dressing rooms. Well, increasingly, as the show went on, I became more and more comfortable, and it started to dawn on me how hypocritical this was. We were making a statement that here we are naked in front of the world. Accept us, and accepting our nudity, you will also be accepting certain freedoms that we want you to embrace. But then for this curtain to come down, and then for everyone to quickly get dressed, just seemed terribly hypocritical to me. And all throughout my life, every single situation, many situations in which I should adopt a certain decorum, I don't. And I don't on purpose, very consciously. And I began not getting dressed. And I would walk back to my dressing room. And I wasn't sporting a raging hard-on, but I had this sort of elephant's tumescent thing going on, because it was exciting to be in front of people. And the more that I shouldn't get an erection, the more likely I would get one. And I'd walk back to my dressing room. Well, this went on, a couple weeks, and I got a letter. I was called into the production manager's office, and Sam said to me that I was being suspended. I was going to be suspended and then sent to another production. And he gave me a letter, and the letter was from the Stagehands Union. It wasn't from the other actors, although they might have, there was, I'm sure, some rancor among them also. But the stagehands, these old Irish Catholic stagehands who'd been there forever, forever and ever and ever, they were quite offended, And I was fired. So my sexuality, and my sexuality and my erection, of course, went on to inform my entire life with my own erection and then directing other people's erections for years and years and years. I can't tell you, I probably spent 2 years of my life waiting for people to get it up. Seriously. So, back to 1969, here I am at this moment of truth. What can I do to set myself apart from these people? What can I do to let them know that no matter how hard I beg and plead them to allow me into their army, they don't want me? They do not want me. What can I do to make them understand how different I am than them? And I took my clothes off. I've never done this story on stage before, but in just once in a while relating it to a girl I was trying to seduce or something. Legend infiltrates our stories, doesn't it? And I started, and you begin to believe it. It's been a process, separating what's real from what's not. And I started to say that there was a beautiful nurse, and I was concentrating on this beautiful nurse, and I got an erection, and I couldn't help myself. That's not the truth. There was only this policeman in the Mountie hat, you know, and this janitor dressed as a doctor. There was no nurse. And I'm gonna, in Los Angeles, where I live, I'm a member of an organization called Agape, which I imagine some of you might heard of. It's a spiritual organization. I sing for Agape, I sing gospel. And I have really learned through this past few years more than ever to let go, to be in the moment, and to let God, whatever you may think of God, whatever the fuck you may think of God, to let God inform you. Mind, body, spiritual wisdom, which may be greater than just our trying to think our way through things. I didn't know this at that time. I knew it, but I wasn't aware of it. I couldn't put that into words. And my mind, body, spirit, wisdom somehow told my body what to do. That's all I can. And I took my clothes off, and I had an erection. And thank you. Thank you. Put your clothes back on, please. I understand. I understand. I'm telling you, there was no discussion. There was no admonition. There was just, please put your clothes back on. Go in this, they asked me to go in this Pepto-Bismol colored little room. Well, I waited for a while longer, and I did not know at that point if they were going to come in and say, you got to get you on the front lines. That's quite a weapon you got, boy. You know, I didn't know what they were going to do. And I went in this Pepto-Bismol colored room, and this plainclothes gentleman came in. He was a psychiatrist in the Milwaukee area. And he didn't even talk to me. He just started writing down and handed me a form to sign. And I was looking and said, we're giving you a 1Y. Now, 1Y is what they give you when you are demented and perverted beyond. I'm sure there's not. I don't mean to give this to you as the official designation, but a lot of y'all out there would be 1Ys in 1969. Seriously, all of Portland might be 1Y in 1969. And you know, and it does read, because I did look it up, the only time that 1Ys can fight in combat is once it's an emergency. So I imagine the Russians are coming, and down from the hills comes all the perverts and the pansies running down, you know, I'm ready, can I fight now? So they gave me a 1Y. And the officer, the psychiatrist said to me, You understand? This is what he said, and I've really thought time thinking about the real words. Do you understand that you are responsible for curing this sickness? The sickness that he was referring to was that I was gay. Now, I'm not gay. I'm not sure. I'm not gay. Doesn't matter. I wasn't gay. I wasn't gay then. Wasn't part of my repertoire then, okay? And at that point, if I had just come into the place and go, I'm gay, they might have put me in jail. Being gay in 1969 was a different deal than being gay now. Much different, okay? It would color you for the rest of your life in ways that you might not enjoy. Wasn't even in my head. He assumed that I was gay, and they kicked me out of the Army. They had no way, and thinking about it since, they had no way of dealing then with homosexuality, with being gay. They had no language. They couldn't even talk about my erection. But there was no language to even talk about it. So, sent me on my way out of the Army, and that's how I got out of the Army. And trying to think, is there really, men get an erection? I'm going a little bit off page here. But is there a wisdom there? Our erections want to go where they're loved. They don't want to, they don't, if you are within certain bounds of normality, they don't want to go where you're not wanted. They want to go where you're loved. So if there's, for me, and maybe for you, if there's a takeaway from this, it's listen to your erections.